station.
This is Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines. I'm Pia Hontiveros. Tonight on the program, flags at half-staff and messages of condolences. The country mourns former President Fidel V. Ramos, remembering him as a stabilizer in government and economy. President Bongbong Marcos says the government has no intention to rejoin the International Criminal Court, which is investigating alleged crimes under the Duterte administration's war on drugs. And a new set of queens will raise the country's flag on the international stage. We give you the highlights of this year's Binibining Pilipinas Grand Coronation Night. The entire nation is mourning former President Fidel V. Ramos. Ramos, popularly addressed as FVR, died Sunday. No details yet on the cause of death. Ramos was the 12th president from 1992 to 1998. He was 94. President Bongbong Marcos declared a 10-day period of mourning until August 9th. That means the national flag will be flown at half-staff from sunrise to sunset at all government buildings and installations, as tributes pour in from sitting and former officials, lawmakers, and even foreign diplomats. The armed forces also honoring its former commander-in-chief today, beginning with a reveille at 5 a.m., a salvo of 8 gunfire to represent the first 8 provinces that rose against the Spanish colonizers. This was followed by 1 artillery gunfire every 30 minutes from 6 a.m. until 5 p.m. A salvo of 8 gunfire repeated at 5 p.m. This happens only today. A formal notice of death announcement of former President Ramos was made in all camps. All military personnel will wear the black mourning bands for a month. Flags in all camps and stations fly at half-staff. Wake and funeral honors are separate and distinct. Before serving as the country's 12th president, FVR was among the key personalities in the 1986 EDSA People Power Revolution. Here's a look back at his life in public service. West Point graduate, Korean War veteran, Philippine constabulary officer, and then its chief in the years before EDSA 1986. His defection and decision to hold up in Camp Aguinaldo with then Defense Minister Juan Ponce Enrile and the Ram Boys sealed the fate of former President Ferdinand Edralin Marcos. Cory Aquino chose him to be her AFP Chief of Staff, then Defense Secretary, and later presidential candidate. Breaking ranks with the political party LDP after losing to House Speaker Monching Mitra in a convention, Ramos formed Lakas, which was his vehicle to run in 1992. His campaign slogan, a clever take on his name and his date with history, EDSA 92, won that election with just 23% of the vote. But the master tactician, he and House Speaker Joe De Venecia cobbled together a rainbow coalition. As president, he led over a period of economic achievements toward so-called tiger economy status, credited with dismantling monopolies, cheering the country towards Philippines 2000, legislating protection for migrant workers, bringing a measure of peace to Mindanao. Diligent and disciplined, his trademark rolled-up sleeves were not unusual, insisted on CSW, complete staff work, not your regular politician, but mastered the art of war and diplomacy. When he stepped down from office, he did so with grace and dignity, turning over the presidency to the man who handily beat his own choice for president. Everyone knew his trademark thumbs-up sign and his trademark Kaya Natin To rallying cry and his trademark sense of humor. He was Steady Eddie, the man who kept democracy alive and intact through every coup Cory Aquino faced down. He was Tabaco, the man who chomped on his cigar like there was no tomorrow. He was FVR, PC Chief, Armed Forces Chief of Staff, Defense Secretary, Commander-in-Chief, husband to Ming, father to 5 daughters, and a grandfather. Soldier, freedom fighter, leader, visionary, patriot, a man of our times, a man for the ages. Among those who sent condolences to the bereaved family of Ramos were President Bongbong Marcos and other former leaders. Marcos says, quote, "We did not only lose a good leader, but also a member of the family," unquote. Ramos's mother is the first cousin of the president's grandfather, Mariano. Former presidents Rodrigo Duterte and Joseph Erap Estrada also expressing sadness over the death of FVR. They highlighted his accomplishments. Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri describes Ramos as one of the country's brightest leaders, while former Senator Frank Drilon remembers him as the country's stabilizer in fighting for democracy and improving the economy in his years of public service. But how did the late president face reporters during his time? Veteran Filipino journalists remember FVR and his contributions to our society. Our correspondent Stanley Gaheta reports.
Diligent. He was a very diligent president.
Action. Action.
For veteran journalists Vergel Santos and Melinda Quintos de Jesus, the words diligent and action best describe the late president. They remember FVR's dedication to serve the country wholeheartedly.
He was prepared to conduct a relationship of mutual respect between power and freedom, between the presidency and the journalist.
You know that if you're covering him and if he ever invites you to join whatever it is that he's doing, you need to be ready for the action.
Santos writes for Business World, while Quintos de Jesus was a Philippine Star columnist that time.
He always made himself accessible to the press. We quarreled quite a bit. I mean, and he allowed violent exchanges, so long as they were verbal. He respected journalists. He respected constitutional freedom.
I thought this man knows how to do these things, and he decides right away what is best, I think, for the people, to bring whatever aid that he could bring. He realized right away that governance involved communicating with the media.
For them, FVR filled the huge gap after Cory Aquino's administration, providing stability to a country enjoying its newly restored democracy.
Kahit military siya, hindi niya hinigpitan ang democratic space. Hindi niya binawasan ang democratic space.
While each leader may be judged differently as a success or failure, they hope Ramos was able to accomplish one thing.
I think he did not do enough to put the Marcoses in their place. You know, remember that the Marcoses returned from exile at about his term and stayed on. I warned that in time, if these people had not been put in their place, they would be back in power in no time. I told him that.
For two journalists, FVR was a visionary leader and was not afraid to criticize or praise leaders after him.
I've never known of a more diligent. He did not give the impression that he knew everything, you know. A part of his diligence was reaching out to experts.
He did not slip into the usual military mindset of controlling and of being afraid of all the ideas that we must think about in order for us to find the solution for ourselves.
But for them, one thing is for sure, FVR's legacy will remain. Stanley Gaheta, CNN Philippines.
Country also remembers another former president, Cory Aquino, on her 13th death anniversary. Aquino's family held a mass in honor of the late former president. The mass was streamed live on the Facebook page of the Ninoy and Cory Aquino Foundation to allow supporters to join virtually. Aquino was the country's first female president and was considered a democracy icon. She took office in 1986 following a peaceful revolution that toppled the regime of President Ferdinand Edralin Marcos. Aquino battled colon cancer in 2008 and died of cardiorespiratory arrest the year later. President Marcos says the Philippines will not rejoin the International Criminal Court. Rex Remito reports the chief executive questions the need to resume the probe into the Duterte administration's war on drugs.
We can recall President Marcos met with his legal team last week. That's because of the International Criminal Court's ongoing investigation relating to the reported crimes against humanity that happened under the Duterte administration. That includes the killings under the drug war and killings in Davao City when Duterte was still mayor. Solicitor General Menardo Guevara earlier said the meeting's agenda is about the government's position on the ICC probe. The ICC invited the Philippines to submit, although not required, a comment on the investigation by September 8. If government submits, it must prove the justice system is working to uphold accountability regarding the killings. For the chief executive, however, there's no need for ICC to investigate in the Philippines.
Sinasabi naman namin may investigasyon naman dito. At patuloy rin naman ang investigasyon. Bakit magkakaroon ng ganon? So anyway, para alam natin ang gagawin natin, if we will respond, if we will not respond, kung sakali man sasagot tayo, ano magiging sagot natin, or possible din, hindi natin papansinin dahil hindi naman tayo sumasailalim sa kanila.
The President also ordered his legal team to study ICC's procedures to avoid misinterpretations on their actions. That includes the steps government should take, who should write to whom, and the contents of their letters. The Justice Department under the Duterte administration earlier launched a review on the war on drugs last 2020. For the ICC, however, it's not enough since the review mostly took on administrative and not criminal sanctions. We have yet to wait and see whether or not the government will submit a comment regarding ICC's investigation. Rex Remitio, CNN Philippines.
The Foreign Affairs Chief will miss his first official meeting with top diplomats in Southeast Asia after testing positive for COVID-19. Secretary Enrique Manalo says the country will be ably represented by Undersecretary for Bilateral Relations and ASEAN Affairs Maria Teresa Lazaro in the 55th ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting in Cambodia this week. Manalo got his COVID-19 diagnosis over the weekend and will undergo an RT-PCR test within the week. The DFA confirming also U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken will meet with Manalo and President Marcos during his visit to the Philippines on August 6th. President Marcos appoints a new chairperson for the Commission on Elections. Former COMELEC Commissioner George Garcia will lead the poll body until February 2029. Back in June, the Commission on Appointments bypassed Garcia's appointment as COMELEC Commissioner to give way for the Marcos administration to make its own picks. Garcia previously represented Mr. Marcos in his unsuccessful electoral protest against former Vice President Leni Robredo. The president also naming new chiefs for 3 law enforcement agencies. Medal of Valor awardee and Southern Luzon Command Chief Lieutenant General Bartolome Vicente Bacaro is now the Armed Forces' next Chief of Staff. He is the first top military official to serve under a 3-year fixed term because of a new law granting fixed terms for top military posts and changing the age of retirement of soldiers depending on their rank. Northern Luzon Police Area Commander Lieutenant General Rodolfo Azurin has been appointed Chief of the Philippine National Police. He succeeds PNP Officer in Charge Vicente Danao. And a National Bureau of Investigation Officer in Charge Medardo de Lemos will be the agency's director. When we come back, the Philippines reports over 24,000 new COVID-19 infections, while Tristan Nadal takes us through the strict travel protocols in China. And we revisit this special moment for the new Binibining Pilipinas Queens. Pauline Versosa has the highlights of the Grand Coronation Night. Stay tuned. Welcome back to CNN Philippines. Independent researchers flag increasing positivity rates or the number of people getting sick with COVID-19 across the country. Octa research fellow Guido David says at least 19 provinces saw higher positivity rates at over 20%. Capiz had the highest increase from 30.6 to 51.2% last week. The positivity rate here in Metro Manila slightly rose to 15% from 14.2% as of July 29th. Latest figures are higher than the 5% benchmark set by the World Health Organization. The Health Department recording 24,100 new cases from July 25 to 31, 24% higher than the previous week. The daily average was at 3,443. In China, the capital Beijing slowly reopening to more foreign travelers as it continues to implement its zero COVID-19 policy. CNN Philippines was one of the media outfits allowed to enter China. Tristan Odalo tells us what to expect when visiting the East Asian country.
A centralized quarantine hotel in Guangzhou City in southern China will be our home for the next 7 to 10 days as mandated by China's epidemic prevention and control measures against COVID-19. Despite the easing of restrictions in July, only a handful of foreign travelers are allowed to return to China. So far, foreigners with residence, diplomatic, and work visas are permitted to enter the East Asian country. But before you can reach its borders, a traveler has to go through a tedious process. After 4 days of mandatory pre-departure quarantine in Manila and at least 8 RT-PCR tests, a China-bound traveler must wear a personal protective equipment before boarding the plane. In the airport, passengers are not encouraged to mingle with each other and must maintain physical distancing.
We're here at the airport now. Hinihintay na lang natin yung flight patungong Guangzhou, China. Then from there, hindi pa rin tayo makakapunta sa Beijing kasi kailangan pa rin natin mag-quarantine for another 10 days.
After an almost 2-hour flight from Manila, another COVID-19 test will be conducted at the Guangzhou airport before being cleared to board a service vehicle.
After nung masusing proseso sa immigration at hindi maraming steps yung pinagdadaanan bago ka talaga makalabas dito sa Guangzhou Airport. So ito, mula rito sa bus, dadalhin kami ngayon sa quarantine hotel.
China has recently cut down the number of quarantine requirements for foreign travelers from the original 21 days down to 7 days hotel quarantine and additional 3 days home quarantine. But this does not mean that Beijing is lifting restrictions. Chinese health authorities say cutting down the transmission of COVID-19 remains to be a daunting task.
We will take serious measures and to put in place the closed-loop management to cut the spread of the cases to other parts of China.
China's zero-COVID policy involves mass testing, strict isolation, and citywide lockdowns triggered by a handful of cases. Beijing is also ramping up its vaccination to realize its goal of containing the virus.
With emerging new variants of the coronavirus, some health experts and even the World Health Organization are questioning the sustainability of China's zero COVID-19 policy. But despite the possible economic impact, Chinese President Xi Jinping maintains that their approach is effective and any move to veer away from this direction would be detrimental to China's massive population of over 1.4 billion people. In Guangzhou, China, Tristan Nodalo, CNN Philippines.
Back here at home, a private hospitals group says health facilities are ready to handle monkeypox cases. It says since there is no treatment for the disease, each symptom will be treated accordingly. Patients with monkeypox symptoms should undergo immediate testing and isolation. Isolation should be done for at least 21 days. Supportive treatment will be carried out depending on the symptoms.
Meron pa, meron pa!
Powerful tremors continue to rock parts of Abra and the Ilocos region. The latest, a magnitude 5.1 before 3 this morning. Vegan officials now consider subsidizing the repair of damaged heritage homes. Where to get funding is the question. David Santos reports.
In the earthquake aftermath, cleaning up damaged structures as part of recovery efforts. The almost 2-century-old Sequia mansion littered with debris. From ruined walls to broken antiques and memorabilia, it is among close to 200 heritage houses in Vigan that badly need repair.
Just want to make sure that the integrity of the house is saved. And then once we save the house for now, then we can work on the eventual restoration of the structure.
Full restoration of these historical homes, Vigan Mayor Bonito Singson says, could cost from 15 to 50 million pesos each. The city government now scouting for funds to have private owners shoulder the repairs.
We want to preserve these ancestral houses. These are part of our history. The entire Filipino nation owns this heritage. No, it would be a mortal sin to let this disappear.
Repair and restoration may no longer be an option for other homes. This modern 10 million peso 2-story house in Magsingal town was on its final stages of a 3-year construction when the massive tremor struck. Its owners now unsure on what to make of it.
Malaking panghihinayang, sir.
In Bantay town, just outside Vigan, the Catholic Church holds Sunday Mass in a badminton court.
Idalangin ko po na parang sana po wala nang lindol.
It's uncertain if the St. Augustine Parish, which dates back to the 16th century and now closed to the public due to damaged walls, could still reopen. A team of geology experts is going around the Ilocos region documenting the impact of the destructive quake as well as aftershocks. In some coastal communities, land deformation, which experts call liquefaction.
Yung proseso po kasi ng liquefaction, kapag yung lupa natin na mabuhangin, no, at buhaghag at meron tayong mababaw na water table, ibig sabihin pag hukay natin may tubig agad sa ilalim, maaari siyang mag-liquefy o mag-astang parang likido, no?
This riverside surface rupture in this part of San Vicente town, experts say, could also be due to liquefaction. Moist, loose soil breaking down when shaken violently.
In an island off Kawayan town, reports of more heavy damage. PHIVOLCS is expected to release its findings and issue recommendations to make communities more resilient. David Santos, CNN Philippines, Ilocos Sur.
More stories ahead on Newsnight. It was a night of grace, beauty, and inspiration. We look back at this year's Binibining Pilipinas pageant. You're watching CNN Philippines. This is Newsnight. In sports, 11-time NBA champion Bill Russell has died at the age of 88. His family said he died peacefully with his wife by his side today. Philippine time. Not only was Russell the league's first black head coach, he was also the first African-American head coach of any U.S. professional sports team to win a championship. Russell also received the U.S. Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2011. In a statement, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said, quote, Bill stood for something much bigger than sports, the values of equality, respect, and inclusion. In Indonesia, veteran Paralympian Ernie Gawilan captures the country's first gold in this year's ASEAN Para Games. Gawilan topped the men's 400-meter freestyle event today. Swimmer Roland Sabido won the second gold medal in the men's 400-meter freestyle S9 class. Sunday was a big night for pageant fans. Which of the 40 beauties in the Binibining Pilipinas 2022 Grand Coronation captured a crown? Pauline Versosa has the highlights.
A new set of queens will represent flag and country on the international stage after topping the 58th Binibining Pilipinas Grand Coronation Night held at the Araneta Coliseum on Sunday.
Our Binibining Pilipinas International 2022 is... Binibini 23, Nicole Bonamel from Cebu!
Cebu's Nicole Borromeo bested 39 other candidates for the most coveted crown. The 21-year-old interior design student was not only a vision of beauty, she also won the hearts of many during the Q&A portion.
Based on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself as a responsible Filipino citizen, and why?
I'd like to give myself a good 8, because I know that there's always room to improve. There's so much I don't know, but there's so much I'm willing to learn, and I hope to do that with you.
Borromeo succeeds Hannah Arnold, who has yet to compete in the Miss International pageant set later this year. Meanwhile, returning for her second year is 2021 first runner-up Gabrielle Basiano, who clinched the Binibining Pilipinas Intercontinental crown. Basiano was also named Best in Swimsuit and Best in Long Gown, becoming only the second contestant to bag both awards since Catriona Gray in 2018.
No matter what shape you have or anumang size mo, as long as you have a good heart, then you're okay to join a pageant.
Early pageant favorite Chelsea Fernandez of Tacloban also stunned the catwalk with her captivating performance to win Binibining Pilipinas Globe. Basiano and Fernandez will be defending the country's crowns in their respective competitions.
Yes, medyo pressured kasi of course the Filipinos are really aiming for the back-to-back crown, but promise I will give my best and we will get that Globe International crown.
It was also a dream come true for 19-year-old Roberta Tamondong, who bagged the Binibining Pilipinas Grand International title. TV host and comedian Herline Nicole Budol finished first runner-up, nearly sweeping all the special awards. She was also praised by fans for speaking in the native tongue during the Q&A.
Ang sarap palang mangarap. Ang sarap mangarap. Walang imposible. Isa po akong komedyante na laki sa hirap. At ang aking transformasyon ay ang magbigay ng inspirasyon.
Actress Stacey Gabriel of Cainta Rizal finished second runner-up. Among the new queens, Gabrielle Basiano will be the first to compete in the 2022 Miss Intercontinental pageant this October 14 in Egypt. Pauline Versosa, CNN Philippines.
And that is it for now. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pia Hontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
Several things might make us feel down. Stress at work, arguments with your significant other. But what about changes in the season? In this episode, we will talk about seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, S-A-D, also known as seasonal depression. Let's find out how this mood disorder affects a person and how best to manage it. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome to MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Our guests are here today to give insight on seasonal affective disorder. With us is Ms. Lorraine C. Cerezo. She's a psychologist from MPsych. Also with us is Dr. Dex Macalintal. He's a family and lifestyle medicine specialist from the Calamba Medical Center. Thank you both for joining us on the program. Now, first things first, let's talk about the difference between sadness and clinical depression. Lorraine, I'll start with you. Can you briefly explain to us what sadness is as opposed to clinical depression?
Generally, symptoms of depression and sadness, usually we think na kapag we're lonely, we're feeling sad, we're feeling down, that's a normal thing to experience for us. However, when we say that it's already clinical depression, the severity of the sadness, in addition to other symptoms na you're feeling sluggish, there's a feeling of hopelessness, sadness, worthlessness, it already becomes severe enough that the person is not able to function anymore. No? Minsan may kasama pang mga thoughts of suicide yon. So the level of severity really is the difference of just feeling sad and being clinically depressed.
Now let's talk about seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, SAD. As the name suggests, seasonal affective disorder occurs during certain times of the year. Now, Dr. Dex, generally speaking, how can some identify that they might have seasonal affective disorder? What are some of the ways in which this is caused?
Let's first start off with what seasonal affective disorder is. This is a mental illness related to depression that occurs with changes of seasons. It could be a working proof that our environment really affects our health. And up until today, the cause of this condition is not yet known to man. Some factors may contribute to having this condition include: one, your biological clock or your circadian rhythm. They say that reduced level of sunlight during the cold seasons may disrupt the body's clock, leading to the feelings of depression. This is related to the second contributor, which is actually our neurotransmitters. Because of reduced sunlight, there seems to be lacking nutrients that are needed by the body to produce some of these neurotransmitters, such as your serotonin. This then causes a drop in levels, which may then trigger depression.
Okay, that's a very good description of what SAD is. But a lot of the studies on seasonal affect disorder are in countries where they have winter, long winter seasons. Lorraine, how can this relate dito sa atin, dito sa Pilipinas, where we only have 2 seasons basically, itong wet and dry seasons? Pwede rin mangyari ba ang SAD, seasonal affective disorder, dito sa Pilipinas?
Yes. Now, research suggests na, syempre, if you are closer to the equator, wherein there are less significant changes in seasons, usually fewer cases ang SAD. However, even if we're in a tropical country, there are actually still significant periods time, diba, in our year wherein we experience longer yung gloomier seasons and rainy seasons. And that is the time when it's likely for Filipinos also to experience the symptoms of seasonal affective disorder.
Now, Dex, what symptoms do we usually see in a person with seasonal affective disorder? Because there's, I think, a big important factor here is when you mentioned that the hormones play a significant role in what we feel as well.
Yeah, so kasama dyan, sir, yung oversleeping or hypersomnia, sometimes overeating, particularly craving with your carbohydrates or refined carbohydrates. Then you get weight gain and, of course, social withdrawal. Sometimes it also occurs on the other side of the spectrum, like poor appetite or leading to weight loss, restlessness or agitation, anxiety, and even episodes of violent behavior leading to self-harm. So kaya kinakailangan talaga na ma-diagnose natin agad ito, because early diagnosis will then lead to early intervention.
So a lot of those symptoms mentioned by Dr. Dex, I'm sure a lot of our viewers were able to probably pinpoint or relate with some of them. And that's why after the break, we'll discuss who the people most at risk of this condition are. We'll be right back here on Med Talk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome back to Med Talk Health Talk, where caring is our calling. Earlier on the program, we discussed what seasonal affective disorder is, as well as some of its symptoms. Now, let's identify who are prone to develop this type of condition. Lorraine, let's talk about age groups here, or the demographic of people who are more likely to suffer from seasonal affective disorder or maybe some form of depression kapag nagpalit ang mga season? Ano mga age group dito?
Yes, no? So when it comes to yung susceptibility natin or who are at risk when it comes to age group, research would indicate na mas madalas it would be people belong to the age group ng 18 to 30. As you get older, it's less likely for you to get SED. That's for the age group.
So I think that's a very important point there. So it is actually seen in those as young as 18 years old. What is it about the young people that they're more prone to this type of depressive behavior?
Yeah, no, of course, for younger people, no, usually they're still, of course, developing, no, for younger people, especially pag mga adolescents, mas madalas, no, there are still hormonal changes that are happening, so that imbalance can also contribute to their susceptibility. So usually, syempre, for younger people, no, it's sometimes may difficult sila when it comes to dealing with negative emotions.
Now, Dr. Dex, when it comes to the people who are at risk of developing seasonal affective disorder, does lifestyle play a significant role on those who might be affected by this?
Well, tama naman, ano. Pero meron kasing mga risk factors talaga. So katulad ng mga family history natin, if there's a family member who was diagnosed with SAD, there is a risk for the family. Pero that's the non-modifiable risk factor. For the modifiable risk factor, nakita kasi na sa mga pag-aaral na people who has low vitamin D levels, no, kapag hindi sila masyadong exposed to sunlight, mas nagkakaroon sila nito. Yung mga laging nanonood na lamang ng TV, hindi masyadong lumalabas ng bahay, hindi nag-ehersisyo, pero laging nakakubkob na lamang kung tawagin nila, no? Sila yung mas mga at risk dito. Also, kapag ang kinakain ng mga tao is more of processed, fatty, and refined carbohydrates, also yung mga tao na mahilig sa alcohol, and of course, those who are not really socializing with their friends, and they are just at the background, yan, mas at risk sila sa pagkakaroon ng SAD.
Now, Lorraine, is it possible for people who are experiencing a pre-existing mental health condition, can they develop a seasonal affective disorder?
No, definitely, no. So actually, when it comes to depression, ito kasi seasonal affective disorder, it's like a subtype actually of depression. So usually kapag you are already suffering from a mood disorder or any type of depression, it's more likely, no? Parang may predisposition ka or higher susceptibility ka to develop seasonal affective disorder.
I'd like to correlate this with something that recently happened, especially in the last 2 years. Ayun yung lockdown, the pandemic, everyone was cooped up at home. It brought about different forms of anxiety with a lot of people. Could that be a factor for someone having seasonal affective disorder later on?
Okay, so when it comes to the isolation, definitely there have been a lot of studies during the pandemic time that isolation has been something that's been a very important factor when it comes to people experiencing depressive symptoms, feeling anxious, and that can be a factor, especially if people keep on isolating themselves instead of spending time with others and strengthening their social support. So kumbaga that can be a risk factor. No? Ang difference lang naman is that when it comes to seasonal affective disorder is that the symptoms usually occur during a particular time of the year.
Dr. Dex, for someone who might be feeling these certain feelings of depression, loneliness, at certain times of the season, are there health risks involved with this, with other parts of the body, physiologically for that matter?
Well, definitely. Kasi kapag medyo we are having this type of symptoms, now marami yung mga nag-oversleep. Let's start with oversleeping. Oversleeping is related to weight gain. And if you are gaining weight, you are more prone to having obesity, which is then related to diabetes and hypertension and heart diseases. Social withdrawal. So having yourself withdrawn from the social aspect of your life, maaari na you feel more isolated, which is then related to a lot more diseases. So, nakita sa mga pag-aaral na kapag medyo socially withdrawn tayo, mas nagkakaroon ng mga mararaming sakit. Kasama dyan ang non-communicable and communicable diseases. So, definitely, our environment affects us and also our community affects us.
So it can pretty much have like sort of a domino effect here, Dr. Dex, no? That's why I'd like to ask Lorraine, how can we prevent people from dismissing signs of seasonal affective disorder? How can we help them get that proper diagnosis to start with?
Yes, no. So it's very important for us to be able to recognize the symptoms of seasonal affective disorder. No, siguro helpful dyan for some people, no, you can actually keep like a mood diary. No, that can be helpful. And once you recognize the symptoms, no, it's important to identify how am I performing, no? Nagagawa ko pa ba yung mga simpleng tasks ko sa bahay? Yung simpleng paggising, pagligo, paggawa ng simple chores. Kasi kapag it's to that extent na hindi ka na talaga nakaka-perform ng maayos, that's a really important sign that tells us na it might be a time for us to seek professional help.
Now, coming up, we'll share ways to help treat this seasonal condition that affects our overall mental health. Only here on MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and you're watching MedTalk Health Talk. Today we've been talking about seasonal affective disorder, SAD. Now that we have a good understanding of this form of depression, let's discuss some of the ways that we can manage this and even probably prevent it from happening. Now I'll start first with Lorraine. Let's talk about talking to someone. A lot of people may have problems. They talk to their significant other maybe even a family relative. Is this enough? Or kailangan ang mas maganda dito is to be able to talk to a mental health professional talaga?
When it comes to a person already suffering from the symptoms of seasonal affective disorder, of course, it helps to have a strong social support. Definitely, nakakatulong yun. But for us to really alleviate the symptoms that you are experiencing, it's important to seek professional help. Because through that you'll be able to seek the right ways on how you can manage your symptoms.
Here in the Philippines, there's a big cultural factor with that, no? There's actually even a stigma when it comes to talking to mental health professionals. What's your advice? Where can people call or where can they go? Is there a website that they can go to?
Yes, no, that's true. No, unfortunately, no, even until now, tama ka dyan, Doc Gomez, there's still a lot of stigma when it comes to seeking professional help, no? If you want to seek professional help, no, it is really for, your general well-being. And if you feel like you really need to seek professional help, no, there are actually a lot, no, of centers where you can actually seek help. And that could already be of help for you so that you can help manage your symptoms. Because if you're suffering from the symptoms, tapos you keep it to yourself, you suffer silently from the symptoms, that's only going to worsen. And your symptoms will be much more severe, making it more difficult for you already to cope with it.
Now, Dr. Dex, when it comes to clinical depression as well as the seasonal affective disorder, there's always a biological component to this. And of course, medication prescribed by the correct doctor does work wonders in helping people out. In lieu of going towards medicine, are there natural ways that people can boost those happy hormones that we were talking about early on in the show? Are there certain lifestyle changes that they can do?
Yes, if someone has been at risk for developing this type of disorder, or if someone has been having these symptoms that we were talking about, it would be a great help to consult a medical professional for help. And also, maintaining a healthy lifestyle would be a great idea. Number one, open the blinds. Work closer to a bright window. Take a walk outside, do regular exercises in the morning to catch the early morning sun. And of course, normalize your sleep patterns by having a regular sleeping schedule. Also, remember that we have to have those cofactors so that we can nourish our neurotransmitters. So make healthier choices for meals and snacks, and avoid eating too much processed and fatty foods, and of course, refined carbohydrates. You eliminate alcohol, and of course, if you're doing recreational drugs, tigilan nyo na po yan. Walang magagawang mabuti yan sa mga buhay ninyo. Also, practice stress management techniques like yoga, meditation, and socialize and rekindle relationships with friends as they offer support and, of course, shared laughter.
Now, Dex, since sunlight is a big factor here, do you think those who work the night shift, are they at risk for this as well? Should they be watching out for any signs of depressive symptoms?
Well, definitely, kasi nga kulang na nga sila ng sunlight. But ang maganda lang is kapag umaalis sila ng trabaho nila, they are also exposed to sun. But yes, they are at risk of having that, and it would be great if they consult us para makita natin kung saan sila nagkukulang.
How important is it, Dr. Dex, to have an exercise routine incorporated in someone's daily life in order to get the benefits from this?
Being active is a great step in managing this type of disease or this disorder. Kasi tandaan natin that movement is movement. And when you talk about exercise, when you talk about physical activity, it would greatly help you get those endorphins and get those hormones and get those neurotransmitters in play.
Now, Lorraine, when it comes to any disease, we always like to talk about prevention. But in this case, is it possible to prevent such feelings of depression coming about or even escalating to a certain point?
Well, when it comes to prevention, that's a tricky question because when you talk about seasonal affective disorder, actually any type of mental health disorder, when you already have the predisposition to have it, it's very difficult for you to prevent it. But that doesn't mean that we can mitigate its effects. So for seasonal affective disorder, the thing about it is it's predictable. We know when it's about to arrive, the symptoms usually during the winter or the colder seasons. So if we are able to prepare ourselves, even before it comes, then the symptoms will not be so severe and we can better manage them.
Now, before we go, do you have any tips, Lorraine, for our viewers?
Yes, so siguro it would be good, to be really self-aware. It's good if you can keep like a journal where you can write your thoughts, your feelings, your experiences, just so you can track if there are certain patterns. You would identify meron bang triggers kapag I experience these negative emotions. Okay, and it's important to keep your social support strong to make sure that we are connected with others. And lastly, syempre, once you recognize the symptoms, do not stop yourself from seeking professional help. Yun naman ang kailangan natin.
And Dr. Dex, of course, any advice for the viewers before we go?
Yes, of course. Tandaan natin that our bodies are governed by our systems na biologic. But inside that system is our mental, emotional, spiritual aspects of health. At lahat yan ay maaaring makaapekto po sa ating mga kalusugan. That's why it is very important that you listen to your body, kumain kayo ng maayos, mag-ehersisyo kayo, at iwasan po ninyo ang mga stress. At gayon din kung mayroon po kayo mga kilala na nahihirapan po i-manage ang kanilang mga sakit, pumunta po tayo sa ating mga medical professionals.
And with that, thank you very much, Dr. Dex Macalintal and Ms. Lorraine C. Cerezo for this insightful discussion and sharing your expertise about seasonal affective disorder. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and thank you for watching Med Talk Health Talk. We'll see you again next time.
Welcome CNN Philippines to bring you the latest news you can use, news you can trust. Listen to Newsnight weekdays 6 p.m.
We now go above and beyond the headlines,
followed by Med Talk Health Talk.
We'll talk about how to keep ourselves healthy during the pandemic.
Politics as usual.
In this country, not everything really goes according to plan, and politics is, as usual,
up close and more. Catch CNN Philippines Hour on DZKI-IRIGA. Weekdays, 6 to 7 p.m.
CNN Philippines Hour sa RPM DZKI-IRIGA. Alas 6 hasta alas 7 ng magi, Lunes hanggang Biyernes. CNN Philippines Hour.
samahan sa hirap at ginhawa, sa lungkot at saya. Salamat